Hello, everyone. I was inspired to speak about something which I feel deep down everybody knows, but to bring it into a realm of consciousness has its own value. And whoever's listening, in the comment section, write down where in the world you're listening from. So, human consciousness is a remarkable opportunity, evolutionary opportunity. And in the subtitle I've written, life is an advantage. Sometimes when I think about, let's say, problems that I want to solve, I realize that before I can find an answer, I need to max out all the ways I can look at it, or I'm capable of looking at it, or there's possibilities to look at something. So it's as if the geometry and the design of the problem and the angles that we access the geometry of the problem have a suggestion to the solution. And the way I guess this the title of this episode, I could see it as a problem to solve. I guess the question is, how is life an opportunity? That's pretty much it. How is human consciousness an evolutionary opportunity? Something about the nature of knowledge, the nature of thinking about anything, is that, and because the initial position of the human being is as a self in a world, there is an initial duality to reality. So a majority of what is considered thinking or the acceptance of knowledge is in some sense as if we're a bird choosing which side of a double-edged branch, double world-edged branch we're gonna land on. Or which side of the coin of destiny we're going to balance ourselves on. What do we have is an important question, and what do we want, or what can we want? When I think about the human being, the human being has access. Something about being a conscious entity in existence. It's as if you're not just existing as something, you have access to relationships with a changing, dynamic world. So we have access to a physical world. A round of applause for consciousness. have access to a physical world. We have access to a linguistic world. We have access to, and let me say it this way, we have access to technology. Or I should have done this in a simpler way here. Let me rewrite the whole thing. Okay, there we go. We have access to objects. We have access to language. We have access to technology. We have access to memory, which is another way of saying history. Because really when we ask an individual, who are you, it's like their memory is their history. You know, it's not about just who you are in life or who you want to become. It's also about who you have been and how who you have been equips you in the present. Really, I guess the main point of this discussion is that if we were to consider the scale of reality, you see, when a person wonders, let me actually put the notepad away and just talk a little bit. I'll come back to it. What are we? A question many think they have the answer of, but it's actually not a thought to answer. When I think about the title, what is being conscious as a human being, as like how can it be an opportunity? I think about it's that part of nature. That means if the Earth's been around 4.5 billion years, and whenever human consciousness opened its eyes, it was like as if at some point in human history, everything was in some sense moving through the unconscious by forces that did not have a sort of individualism or conscious framework. What I mean by this is that consciousness is a recent development. And so in the cosmos, as far as the human intelligence is concerned, as far as our memory extends back, it's as if that we were nothing and now we are something, and now something has a value. But do we as a species comprehend the value of how we are being something and nothing? The mysteries of the world is really where our fascination leads. The human intelligence is mechanistic. To understand a mechanism is to understand its function, and really to wonder about the function of human life. It suggests our purpose. That means there is a very unique correlation between one's ability and one's purpose. Now, I am saying, sure, there's 8 billion individual human beings. Each person has a sort of understanding of their own ability and how they can actualize it. But if we were to wonder about, a type of thinking that is starting from considering what is the species going to do, for me, this has been one of the most incredible realizations. What will the species do? What can the species do? There was a time, or let me say it this way, in certain talks of mine, I've had the vision where I've wondered about the destiny of the human species, and I've considered it, okay, we're going to maintain and we're going to retain our we're gonna remain as biological entities that do not forget their naturalism, and so we will echo into the future as if a sort of unchanging natural entity till the end of time, a sort of evolution of the biology. A maintenance of the biology through evolution. But there has also been times where I have wondered that what if being a human being is a phase in nature? What if, let's say a person is grateful for existing as a human being, and they're grateful in like a time for a time span of, let's say, the life cycle of the human being 100 years. But imagine, right, a person wondering, okay, can I also be grateful that my species in the long, let's say, scale of time, that means poetically from the Big Bang till now, what great value does the human position provide? For me, when I look at human intelligence and I consider it as a phase in nature, the question comes, okay, for how long are we going to be human, and what could we have done while we were human? The most incredible thing is that the human intelligence is a decision-making mechanism, ultimately. What that means is every person has an inner realm and an outer realm, and the inner realm kind of creates the atmosphere where we can feel or have a sort of feeling about our outer realm. really the value of being a human being in a world, being a known creature in an unknown world, is that the limitations of our knowledge give shape to what we can do. You know, some people may fear their limitations and want to surpass them, and then there are others who realize that their limitations are actually poetically cheat codes, you know. What is the clearest vision? A bunch of creatures on a rock in the middle of nowhere, recent acquisition of self-awareness, recent acquisition of language, recent acquisition of development of technology. It's as if the decisions our ancestors have made has led to something. And so now what do we do with what our ancestors, with the visions of with the fruitions of the visions of our ancestors? I think about it from a humanized perspective, you know, and, you know, what do they say? They say if you're a human being, just be a good human being, be a decent person, and in some sense, like, complete your lifetime. But again, when I think about it from the scale of, like, okay, let's say we had a sort of, you know what it is? It's like we're temporary beings with eternal visions. We are mortal creatures with immortal dreams. So if we were to wonder about, in the massive meaninglessness of the cosmos, what grand meaning can mankind's mind attend to? Ultimately, being conscious is a rare opportunity in a cosmic system where a lot of reality is happening unconsciously. Consciousness means information can be reviewed or observed again. That means the incredible thing about the human being is we're not just made of information. We are also aware of the information that is being us, and that awareness gives us an ability to see what other possibilities there are. Imagine every person, or let's say in the future, or the future generations, their psychological structure will be way more fascinating than how we are just being a human being now. In the future, human beings will have multiple senses of identity. They will identify as an individual in their inner realms, They will identify as an individual in their outer realms. They will identify as a collective in their inner realms, and they will identify as a collective in their outer realms. It's as if it's not just the life of an evolutionary animal, it's the life of a species, the permissions that the mind gave into becoming more than what it is. So in the future, children may identify as being their whole species, and I feel the perspective of I am not just a person in an unknown world, but I am the might of the great force that is, it's like evolution strategized, and the strategy of evolution was to, in some sense, bring forth 8 billion conscious agents of subjective meaning. What it is that it's pretty much like this is the grand game. This is the great puzzle that I think every scholar, philosopher, visionary has been trying to solve. And the puzzle is, what do we do with 8 billion creatures on a rock where each creature has their own view of the world? And so when it comes to the vision of the species, it's pretty much to become acquainted with our scope of consciousness, to realize what sort of chess piece we are, and in what sort of chessboard this chess piece is being moved, Me personally, somebody once asked me, like, why are you giving so many talks? Specifically, my father asked me why I'm giving like this many talks, And I responded by saying that for some reason my mind has concluded that the most advanced thing that human beings can do is not to just remain in their inner realm, but it's actually to use the greatest technology at hand. And I am considering, for now at least in 2022, that communication is really the purpose of this creature. The advancement of communication is the advancement of the inner horizons and the way 8 billion creatures will function. What it is that the behavior of the human species is designing its destiny. There's a quote from Guru Padmasambhava I want to read for the viewers. Let me find it. Guru Padmasambhava. Guru Padmasambhava, considered as a bodhisattva of Tibetan Buddhism. That means a bodhisattva is not just an enlightened being, it's a very enlightened being. In ancient Vedic thought and just Buddhist thought, there was this view that there were lokas, there were different dimensions, okay? And so when there's different dimensions in let's say, Tibetan Buddhist mythology, some beings were journeying from lesser worlds to Earth, and some beings were coming down from higher worlds to Earth. As if some beings are stepping down from the staircase of, let's say, potential absolute evolution of intelligence, and some beings are stepping up. So Earth is like a staircase. Now, Guru Padmasambhava, the quote I want to read for you, he says, if you want to know your past life, look at your present condition. If you want to know your future life, look at your present actions. So how a person acts, in some sense, is suggesting the potential of their future life. Now, if we were to wonder about the potential of the future life of the species, it would be how in one moment 8 billion actions are leading to a geometry, to a shape. You see, that's the fascinating thing about consciousness. Consciousness is ultimately in the business or in the game of geometrical transition. You know, we can look at a person and be like, okay, morally this is a good person, this is a bad person, but from a geometrical position there has never been good and bad. There has just been shapes of manifestation. Geometry is very divine, dear viewers. Geometry is a huge part of the metaphysics of the future generations. And in the future, just like how we expect to make, let's say, extraterrestrial contact, where we're like, yo, aliens came down and shake the hands of human leaders, it would also be something where in the future they will also access geometrical entities, geometry that moves before consciousness is there. And this geometry is not just the geometry of how there's forces in nature that we don't understand that are moving us. Because what I find fascinating is that the scientific community and, let's say, the secular community and the religious community, they both acknowledge that there are unknown forces moving us, but it's as if now, do we attribute intelligence to it or do we not? Really, what the atheists and theists were fighting for is that where do we put intelligence in the game of reality? So there is something huge with the geometrical dimension. What I'm trying to do is, in this episode, bring the attention of the viewers to be like, okay, you have your individual life. Your individual life is your geometrical positioning. Consciousness is an awareness of the geometry that is being you. And free will is how an unknown witness directs known form. Because really what I'm doing on some level is... I'll be honest, shapes are moving behind my eyes and I'm just vocalizing them. So the behavior of 8 billion creatures on a rock in the middle of nowhere and how it has become a conscious decision is the opportunity. Consciousness in the human framework is a rare opportunity in the cosmos because there has been nothing of the sort, in the sense that right now, when we look at the universal sector, we are like the most intelligent beings, you know? This is beyond ideas of like everything's oneness and whatnot, you know? There are some things that have emotional meaning. And there are some things that it's not emotional, it's more like, again, the geometry of the moment. The intellect is seeking geometrical salvation. And as the ancient yogis would say, like the heart is seeking emotional salvation. And it is possible to have moments where you are feeling through your heart, and there's moments where you can feel through the intellect. Really, it's how attention is being piloted in the middle of nowhere. So, what is the opportunity? The opportunity is in an unconscious system. A conscious agent has appeared. This conscious agent has ability, and it's as if free will has a capability to move as a physical entity, but it also has a capability to move in its mind, behind its eyes, as a subjective entity, as a character in a story, or as whatever, right? So behind our eyes, it's as if we can take a couple steps ahead of the moment, and then in the outer realms we just follow our mind and it actualizes. Like, imagine a person is thirsty. In their inner realms, instantaneously they see themselves going to the cupboard, grabbing a glass and like filling it with water, right? Like drinking a cup of water. They see the activity occur behind their eyes, and the body, through an instantaneous trust, through a second nature, follows it up. You know, karma may be overwhelming for some people to truly look into and comprehend. But karma is like the inventory of perception. You see, the advantage of being in a changing world is the capability to experience new states of being. To be a human being is like your body is changing slower than your mind. So every day you wake up, you feel like your body's living a new life. Really, what it is, or what consciousness seems to be, is the simultaneous awareness to how the speed of how different dimensions change. The opportunity of human consciousness is that the mind can live ahead of the body. So there is the human opportunity. We are that part of nature that can respond, that can see what's coming and respond to it. If we look at the rest of nature being oblivious to the future, and oblivious to the future, not in the sense like a creature with instincts can't know what's coming in the next moment, but it's just that the human intelligence is that part of nature, or that intelligence on earth, that it has access to a far sight, that has access to a foresight that is superior to other species. They say what really separates lesser species from the human species, other animals, is that the human species is an evolutionary animal that somehow has become conscious of its death. So the awareness that we will stop existing becomes a sort of motivation of a change in how we are being a personalized life force. It's all about conscious agency. That means before human beings, the universe was changing. It didn't matter if it was good or bad. It didn't matter if it was perfect or imperfect. But because human consciousness has developed, there's a value system in place, and it's as if for the first time the value system of the inner life of a creature has become a superior factor of influence of the outer life for all creatures on the planet. For example, if human beings have nuclear war, like penguins and dolphins are all going to be like, what the fuck? It's like lesser species will be baffled, even though they may be unconscious to the depth that the human personality exerts itself. Potentials of the human mind are incredible, but I find that something that should not be forgotten is the collective potential of the human mind. Most people are thinking that they are living their lives, but simultaneously we are living as the life of the species. We're living the collective life. It's as if once a person has individual salvation, they call them individual enlightenment, they call them a Buddha. But somebody who has collective enlightenment, they call them a bodhisattva. And why is there such a thing as collective enlightenment? It means that after an individual in a dimension has been freed, now the dimension needs to be freed of the individuals, but not in the sense of extinction, in the sense of the conscious mind restoring its birthright as a presence of being. I honestly think about, some people may be like, okay, Mr. Within, this is what you're going to say is going to be like, okay, here, I'll say, there's been moments where I've thought, okay, what is the real value of being alive? And the obvious answer, let's say the traditional answer, is that it's a permission, it's an opportunity to experience something you have never experienced before. But now consciousness has brought forth with it an additional dimension where we don't need to just be fascinated by our individual life, but the collective life awaits. We are like the first, or I consider it as such, that 2022 is an era where human beings are from an obsession of individual knowing, realizing a sort of collective potential unknown. It's kind of like you look at a person and you're like, what are all the different ways they can move? So you look at a species and you're wondering, what are all the different ways that it can internally move? What are the behavioral changes that can resculpt the future into one that is not devoid of the human archetype? In my inquiry of what is the meaning of life, I have come to the conclusion that there's an ability given, and the activation of this ability is the purpose of life. It's literally like, if you see a potential, then why is the vision there? If creatures in the void have perceived something, it's as if, why is their perception there? So easily we are distracted from our collective life. The human mind is, I would say, fragile in the sense that once it experiences a bit of cruelty, it feels the outer realms doesn't deserve its presence. The opportunity of human consciousness is that it could be just that phase in nature where intelligence notices itself, and with that comes there's individual responsibility, but the evolution of the individual responsibility is into collective responsibility. I feel that human beings, like there could be human beings right now on the planet who actually hate the world, right? But I will say is that when you see it's a 4.5 billion year old science project and just opportunity, it's as if it's kind of strange, but it's as if death doesn't make sense when life is here. Death is just the limit on life, it's a limitation. But what is the force of reality? People don't say gravity has a lifespan, right? You see, we look at forces beyond the human archetype and we don't see a death to them, right? Nobody says existence dies. It's as if existence goes on to change. It's like when energy can't die and we're an energetic creature, what does that energy do? It's as if does worldhood have an infinite agenda? Like, to me, I understand that sure, the human body is temporal, limited, but when I look at the world happening, the world doesn't seem to be a temporary being, even though there's considerations of entropy, but because it's so vast. The cosmos is so big that if like one part of it dies, it's like we can't say existence dies. Existence continues. It's like there's a greater game happening, and we don't realize it. We're playing a smaller game. It's like we are conscious agents of the microcosmic game. But the macrocosmic game, to be a conscious agent of a macrocosm, would mean that the limitations on your being is actually universal. So it's as if, is the edge of you your body, or is the edge of you the universe? For the body, it's like, sure, the skin is the edge of self. But when you look at the mind, it's how far you can see, and it's like all the sectors, unknown sectors of reality where there's potential meaning dwelling. We all know that, for example, who was it, like Edison invented the light bulb. It's like everybody at that time was like, whoa, we could have done this whole time, right? Like there was an awareness of the possibility existing. So when I think about the human intelligence, I think about how many hidden possibilities, how many dormant possibilities are just waiting to be actualized. It's like you're a person, and a person is a sort of set of behavior and a sort of sequence of actions in accordance to the type of moment it perceives for itself, right? So it's from the beginning of the day till the end of the day, sequence of actions through moments and archetypes in every moment based on new stimulus, right? Just like the Japanese say, the man is not the same room he's in. The man is not the room, what do they say? The man is the room he's in. I think it's pretty much this idea that every moment is illuminated by a subjective archetypal owner. Okay? So if somebody tells me, hey, you were speaking, who owns your moment? I would say, okay, the motivation of the force, the intelligent force that actually happens, it's starting from a ideological position. So it's as if the free will is using an idea like a sword, and it's like, the dance is its own meaning. To give people a sense of what an advanced civilization could feel like, right now I would say, governments are just trying to maintain reality. But imagine in the future, someone doesn't know what to do, and an advanced civilization sends them a letter, And in that letter, it's as if the idea is that the vision of human conscious life is to use the opportunity of consciousness to be capable of directing something that, when the more further back we go in time, the less we could do anything about. Really, what human consciousness is that we can do something about the world that attention has access to. Some choose to endure in this realm, just through an emotional intelligence. It's not wrong. That after some point, right and wrong is how the old world thought. The future generations will not see right or wrong. They will see, just like there's many ways to look at an object, many different angles, they're just going to see there's always been many angles to moments that we thought were just isolated. Pretty much a multidimensional being, its intellect bypasses fear by realizing the potential in other dimensions of its view, of its intelligence. So whoever you are listening to me right now, if you wondered about how being a human being is a remarkable opportunity, a rare opportunity, now the question comes, what do we do with the opportunity that there's a conscious agent in an unknown world that can know things and then in accordance to what it knows acts? Really what it is that the view is going from an individual snapshot photo of what the human being means to a multidimensional performer based on multiple realities. Every moment is multiple-edged, not just double-edged. Like right now, I am looking at the world and I'm saying something. There's 8 billion of us, so there's 8 billion other versions of the world that could function. But what I have noticed is that at some point we will get bored of an individual life. Then we will discover a collective life, and then experientially we will get bored of a collective life, and that's when either we reset the individualism. To me it's kind of like there's this hadith in the Sufi tradition they look upon where it says, it's pretty much God saying, I was unknown and I wanted to be known, and so I made the world. So really what it is it seems that a conscious evolution goes to an unknown point, and when it reaches the unknown, it resets as knowledge. So really it's kind of like the mystery of why a creature would reincarnate in samsara was simply because it could not accept the unknown, it could not be content as the unknown, it could not be present as an unknown. And really, when you look in ancient traditions, the different mystics, yogis, Buddha, the Buddhas, bodhisattvas, the various archetypes of enlightened and holy people, it's like they were holy not because of what they knew, but how they had come to comprehend, or how they had found the contentment with the unknown dimensions of being. This is really the strength of a transcendental character. The attention is present in multiple dimensions, right? People think that, like for example, the idea of a spiritual person is someone who's ignoring physical reality, but in actuality, what spiritual people are is that they are the pioneers of multidimensional psychology, persistence. Right, so it's as if what a spiritual person is that something unknown has moved the knowledge of their moment, so their vitality, it's like if they become truly honest, they cannot ignore the unknown variables, the implication of the unknown to whatever knowledge, is holding the world. It gives me goosebumps sometimes talking about the unknown. Why? Because it's where the magnificent, it's where the greatness of being is hiding. Because if we can accept that we are being an unknown being, then there is hilariously no attachment to knowledge of any type, right? Imagine you're someone who you've read a bit of Buddhism and you're like, no way, are beings trapped in the cycle of karma, their attachments and desires causing them to endlessly reincarnate, in a world they can't escape from. But in reality what it is that the center of the cycle of karma, the wheel of karma, doesn't move. A human being that realizes there is an unknown will to nature, and you ultimately realize you are being that unknown will, then reincarnation does not apply. Rather, journey consciousness becomes its unknown life. There's moments in life where I personally, when I think about myself, I think like, what am I worthy of? Where does my worth take me, you know? And it's like doubting your own free will. What it is it's ultimately potential. So really, it's like every human being is imagined like an unknown being that has landed on the earth. And so this unknown being has to see what it has access to. And then you use what you have access to, then you realize why you had access to it. And upon realizing why you had access to it, it's as if the aftermath of a fulfilled desire. You know, they're in the Four Noble Truths of Buddhism. What are they? It's as if first, life is suffering. Everybody's suffering. Second thing, you know, suffering is caused by attachment, by desire and attachment. The third thing is like this suffering and attachment can be stopped by the person detaching from it. And the fourth noble truth is like the eighth noble path of Buddha is in some sense how you completely disconnect, right? But the idea is kind of like we suffer because we're trying to be something which in actuality requires our own life force to happen, right? I have noticed that in moments where I'm tired, my inner realms are, it's as if my mind is more agreeable with the conditions of my reality. But moments where I have energy, it's as if the rebel spirit is trying to be its own hero by extending beyond its noble universe. Its known universe. For me, a big chapter of human history that is yet to be opened or even written, I personally find it, I don't know, there was a time where I entertained the abstract idea that who I am really is not a soul going from lifetime to lifetime, but a sort of force in existence, poetically like an avatar of a geometrical archangel of reality, where it's another way of saying it's like the person thought they were a soul and then they realized no, they are that consciousness that arises when civilizations are advancing. Guys, I'm telling you, like, there's some people in their life, their past, they discover something about their past life, they're like, no way, you know, and they, like, their life is revolutionized based on that incident, right? And for me, I thought that in some sense, for me, advanced civilization was a sort of revelation of my future life. You know, imagine somebody's like, in my past life I was a king, you know, and somebody then says, buddy, you're still looking at past lives. In my future life, I'm a collective being that is the advancement of all consciousness in the universal sector, you know. So regardless of whether we feel we are a sort of, let's say, universal archetype or just a human archetype, we are pilots of our consciousness. Consciousness is a rare opportunity and a phase, can potentially be seen as a phase in nature. And the idea is that this is really my approach to, let's say, solving problems of any kind. I wonder if I had different eyes, how would the problem look like? And then I wonder about how many different ways there are to approaching a moment, because as far as I'm concerned, it's infinite. That means right now, before I gave this talk or before I chose the title of this episode, there's literally infinite content for my attention to go to. So the opportunity of human consciousness is an awareness to the infinite possibilities where free will can select a destiny. We're not, it's not like we're destined. It's like our consciousness selects its destiny by how it chooses to externalize. In some of my talks, somebody once asked in the comment section, it's like, Mr. Within, try to solve like global psychological problems, and I'm, something in those lines. And I was like, in all these talks I have been saying that the discrimination between one's inner realm and outer realm leads to an unlocking of an ability for a being that is found to be free from its mind and body, because it is aware of them both simultaneously. It's as if think of it this way: there's the body sight, which is the biological eyes. Then there's the mind sight, which is when you close your eyes you can remember or see images behind in your mind space. And then there is an inconceivable witness. It's as if the mind is the light of the projector and the body is like the film that's being projected, right? It's as if the camera that is projecting it is poetically the soul. It's like the soul is, through the light of the mind, projecting an embodiment. And so the remarkable thing is that the soul is not the soul is not light, and it is not matter. It is an awareness to what light and matter do. Every person is trying to be cool in the eyes of history. But really, where is the performance of the free will of the conscious agent, unknown conscious agent? Where is it going? To me, what being a human being or being a creature in a world is like an ability to interact with content. That means the mind is not just a content creator, it's a content interactor, An unknown witness is interacting with the content of an invisible mind, and where the decision behind the momentum of our free will's acceptance of a certain reality comes from, there is a hidden state, right? It's kind of like we look at the light spectrum, the electromagnetic spectrum, and we're like, okay, the biological human bodies are accessing only the observable universe. So right now, whether you are a spiritual person, religious person, let's say, whether you're a scientist, a monk, or a priest, or I don't know, a yogi or whatever, it's like every being, they are not just in agreement that there is an image of existence, but they're also in agreement that there is an unobservable reality. And what reality means is observation. Like, that's the bizarre thing, right? Just the concept of an unobservable universe is so bizarre, right? So bizarre because the universe is only known to be real in our observance. So when we say an unobservable world or an unobservable universe or an unobservable reality, we are saying there is ways that our attention can translate sight or light, which we right now don't know we can, right? There's no greater healing than realizing in an unknown moment, in an unknown world, every moment is an opportunity to pilot attention. because that's all it's about. We think we have to find the meaning of life, but it's like, a leaf, a drop in a river, wondering about what the soul is like. In a talk of mine, I used the metaphor of the body, mind, soul being like three brothers or three sisters, whatever way you choose to see it. But if you see the body, mind, and soul like three brothers, okay, it's like poetically, the middle child is taking care of the younger child. The oldest child is taking care of the youngest and the smallest child. So it's as if poetically the mind is watching over our body, and an invisible mind is watching over our visible body, and an inconceivable soul is watching over our invisible mind and our visible body, sometimes even first to the younger child. It's as if the middle child, I think really, the middle child is really the archetype that has access to both realities. It's like, they say the middle child is ignored, but in reality the middle child is the most blessed. Really, it's just cultivation of nature of mind. That's really what's happening. Our decisions are like simultaneous indirect training for what kind of being and what kind of state we will be. I have experienced grace that goes beyond content, beyond image. So if somebody says, Mr. Within, what do you know? I'll be like, I know that I have experienced a moment where before I could know, I noticed the unknown was there. So it's like the middle child thinking it's the oldest brother, the ego thinking it is the absolute container of reality, and suddenly realizing, no. To be a human being is to be real in the world. Imagine somebody asks a spiritual person, what's the point of being a spirit in an unknown world? What's the point of thinking you are truth in a reality where, imagine, the idea of truth doesn't apply? In a geometric dimension, for example, Plato, the philosopher Plato, spoke about the world of forms. This is a geometrical dimension of intelligence. Our inner realms is semi-occurring in the world of forms. So what that means is, like, life is not just an emotional reality. It is not just an image or a film-like reality. It is also a purely geometric reality. And there are geometrical beings. So imagine somebody in front of them, let's say in a sci-fi setting, let's say an alien lands. You're walking your dog in the park, and imagine an extraterrestrial lands. That's like in your outer realms, you're seeing something. But now imagine you've closed your eyes, you're sitting, in a forest somewhere where there's nature, and you notice that behind your eyes, platonic solids and shape and geometry begins moving on its own. I would testify that I am one of, someone who has seen the world of forms, Plato's world of forms. a purely geometrical dimension to all reality, regardless of any other addition of another dimension's intelligence. There is a geometrical life to the moment that has nothing to do with the human personality, because it is such a universal shape, you know. So, in my inner realms, I have experienced what I've termed, even coined as living geometry, geometrical shapes that just by being present in the attention move before the free will needs to put any effort. Because really, that's what conscious exploration is. Your consciousness is like a frame upon the world. It's like the proximity of reality you have access to, right? And so, when you realize the limitations of this access, this is why in religious tradition, mystical tradition, there was the concept of humility when it came to the achievement of power, right? That means power is something that if you grab it, it burns your hand or it destroys everything, right? But it's something that if you don't grab it or look for it, it comes on its own. It selects. That means imagine concentric spheres. The cosmos is like an onion of dimensions, right? Dimensions layered inside dimensions. And so the permissions of the past are overridden by the exploration of the uncharted territories of the future. Mankind is not alone. Whether behind our eyes we see geometry moving as the invisible other, where in front of our eyes we see extraterrestrials as the manifestation of the invisible other, or angels, or whatever archetype we choose to see. Our visible life in contrast to our invisible life. That means Mr. Within is that person saying, hey, have we been living an invisible life this whole time, and we have, through our fear of trying to comprehend the unknown, just bunkered down in an ideological system. There is an honor to humanity, like being a human being and, living like that, but there's also an honor to the intelligence that is being human, right? That honor is beyond the human archetype. So what man finds, Carl Jung said, unless you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. That's what Carl Jung said about the unconscious. But in reality, what I find is that if this creature attempts to make the unconscious conscious, it will discover states where how intelligence is being is not limited to the human framework. So the act of becoming conscious of the unconscious is actually a sort of transcendental act. It's like we are multidimensionally being singular. And in a sort of singular fashion, we're being multidimensional. And we're oscillating between these modalities. That means pretty much a self in a world that became conscious that there is a world is now wondering how much of my movement is the world moving and how much of it is me moving. And is it that we are living in our own bubbles of reality, thinking that we know the value to the phenomena we see, but there's a sort of creative process that goes, some people think they don't have creativity and imagination, not realizing reality is an act of the imagination. Especially the meaning of reality. And to me, it's as if sometimes when an answer, let's say somebody thinks reality is a type of problem and they think they found an answer, when they see that the application of that answer doesn't resolve the problem of reality, it means the absence of clarity was a lack of seeing depth to the problem. this is what I feel has been a misunderstanding of the human species. Rather than being like, what do we do with knowledge, it has always been, what do we do with the unknown? So whoever you are listening, 2022, due to, let's say, the projection of a different world, we must consciously, through trust of the unconscious, allow our unknown lives to occur. And what it means is that man's mind was only, let's say, limited to the human individualism, but when we realize the mind is not an idea of a person, what the mind actually is that it's a reality generator. It generates reality, and it's like from the beginning of the day to the day to when we sleep, from the morning till the time we sleep, from the moment we wake up to the time we close our eyes. It's as if during that time, how many instances the mind had to entertain a sort of self in the moment. You see, it's like the mind, it's like we're being the space of our mind. It's like after you have achieved your known freedom, then freedom, the one's unknown freedom. Really, the unknown life, the synchronicities of the unknown life of the individual will just be how, like, what the logos is that the spirit of humanity knows where it's going in the future, but the spirit of the human, the idea of the human, is like, you start in your own world, and as much as your own world is similar to the outer world, it's as if your trust is dependent. You know, guys, I'm going to share a story. And this story is, and before I share the story, I'll say this: whoever you are, the awareness of mind reveals a sort of solitude of one's own attention in their inner realm. That it's as if really that transition of an unknown life activating through a known life. It's literally, you trust the world. That means it's like you become, the mind is is the space where worlds change. The body is it's pretty much an awareness that the world is aware of the self and the self is aware of the world. But when it comes to the human position, how a world becomes aware of the self is how the unknown is being in the moment before the known. So trust is instantaneous through the realization that the unknown was in the room first. You know, so it's as if like a wise person or a humble person is being an unknown simplicity before a known complexity, you know. Our minds paint various masterpieces on the empty canvas of the void. But the mind, poetically, that which is moving the brush is not the paint on the canvas. To access a collective life, like, you know, I thought about it that when you look at the modern human being is sculpted by desire. Really, our desires sculpt our character. Now, in Buddhism, they were suggesting, in some sense, a moment where there is a detachment to all desire, and it's like thinking about who you would be if you had no desires. It would literally be a sort of, you would be space. That space before the desire is there, right? So to be free from your mind before it happens. Or to realize instantaneously you are the freedom of the world before the individual needs to get enlightened. We are a cosmic performance as much as we are a human performance. The story I wanted to share earlier, and somebody typed the word jewel in the comment section, Jewel. So it reminded me of this story. This story, I don't know how actual it is, but it's a story attributed to King Solomon, which in the Islamic tradition is seen as a prophet. The story goes that there's this old farmer, and he's failing to, he doesn't have enough money to live. And he goes to King Solomon and says, like, I can't do anything. I'm an old man. I don't have kids. It's like, give me something. And King Solomon gives this old man a jewel. Like this like sapphire or something, like a diamond or something. Gives him a jewel, and so this old man gets really happy, goes home and tells his wife, hide this jewel so nobody takes it, and we have been blessed by a king. So the old wife puts the jewel in like a pot of rice in and then the old wife puts the pots of rice in like their neighbor's like storage, right, or something. And so she forgets where the jewel was, and so the old couple is like, oh no, we don't know where the jewel went. We can't remember. So the old farmer feels ashamed, and he's like, I gotta go to the king again. And he goes to King Solomon and says to King Solomon, I lost the first jewel, forgive me, but still bless me. And King Solomon gives this man another jewel. And throughout the story, the idea behind how King Solomon is deciding is that he goes into a private, dialogue with God, and then it's like then. So King Solomon gives this farmer another jewel. The farmer is, happy, kind of feels great compassion, and feels the king of the land is generous. And so this farmer decides to take this path where he's going through this river, right? So that he doesn't lose it or nothing happens to the jewel. And for a moment, something synchronistic happens, that he suddenly like trips in the river and the jewel falls. And the moment the jewel falls, a fish jumps out of the water and eats the jewel, and the fish falls back into the water, and the farmer has lost the jewel. The farmer goes back to or go home to his wife, and the old wife is like, where's the jewel? What happened? And the farmer is so ashamed and silent. He just sits there and he's like, I lost it. You won't believe what happened. The fish ate the jewel the king gave me. So they're at a point where they've lost both jewels, and the farmer is too ashamed to go to the king, but the old wife says, you have to, we have no choice. And so this defeated, inner realm defeated farmer, he goes to King Solomon and he says, I lost the jewel again. And in that moment, King Solomon goes into this private dialogue with God, and as if saying, okay, what do I do with this situation? And this is a story, guys, remember that. So, and what happens is God says to King Solomon that you think that you can give this man fortune. You think you can give a jewel to this man, even though you are a king. Who is the king of everything? Who is the ultimate in reality, right? And King Solomon realizes that he can't give the farmer anything. Like, it's not up to him, but it's that God actually is destining how ownership is conscious of itself. So King Solomon, after this profound realization with the divine, right, he looks at the farmer and he doesn't say anything, and he just gives the farmer another jewel. And the farmer goes home, and this time nothing happens, and the farmer goes home, and there he's got a jewel from the king. He goes home and he says, wife, I got a jewel. The king was like next level, like being, he gave me another jewel. And so in that moment, the wife suddenly, the moment the husband says the king gave him another jewel, remembers that one of the jewels is in the rice pot that's in the neighbor's house or something. She quickly goes and grabs that rice pot and she says, I found the second jewel. Right, and then the old farmer and the old wife are so happy they now have two jewels, right? And then the old farmer says, all right, what do we have for dinner? And the old wife says, we have fish. And so he, in some sense, cuts the fish to eat it, and he sees it's the jewel that was lost in the river, right? And the moral of the story is that it doesn't matter how powerful of a king the archetype appears in your moment or in your inner realm, right? It is not about the promise of a demigod. It is about the revelation of truth of the absolute. You see, it's that feeling that there is something bigger than your weakness. You see, beyond our knowing, the unknown knows itself poetically. So the moral of the story was that it is the invisible, universal source - authority that gives. Right, that was the moral of that story. But for me, I feel that it's part of that story implies at least what it can signify to the future generations, that we are going to, right now, where the inner realms are experiencing their own version of the outer realms, but what's going to happen is that a sort of symbiosis between the individual known life and the collective unknown life is going to happen. And this is going to take conscious character. It's going to take shape in such a remarkable way where in my inner realms, the vision I've had of how the advanced civilization happens is that it's as if like the vision of an advanced civilization is like the most beautiful sound ever heard, and suddenly those in the slumber of the worlds of the past suddenly hear the songs of the future, the mighty visions of the future that like giants will in some sense carry us to the future. You see, that's the vision of an advanced civilization. It is the effort of the greatest conscious ability in the universal sector to become a giant of manifestation. It's rather than us trying to build the Tower of Babylon, right? Is becoming the Tower of Babylon. Do You see, not somebody who wants to attain the ultimate, but that which has to be ultimate if the ultimate exists. You see, it's the nature of truth after it releases you from an emotional grasp of a subjective outline. So what it is that the person realizes they don't know, in that feeling of I don't know anything. Right? They stare at the world, and for the first time, it's as if their original eyes from the original earth or the original moment of being gets to see everything anew. So really what it is that we communicate through language to kind of teleport our visions, our inner realm visions. Language is like when somebody says, like, writes poetry, it's like they are teleporting an emotional experience into like language, right? Everything that we fear and we don't choose to explore is everything that the future will know that we didn't decide to know. What fear is like a door, which door you choose to open, or at which door you stop opening doors. We should have this view that conscious attention is piloting in the outer realms as a physical entity. In the inner realms, it is tunneling through acts of brain simulation of reality. So the brain is simulating reality instantly, and it does it in multiple times. And what really consciousness is how from the first simulation in the day, what we chose to preserve. Evidently, there are people who have a photographic memory, and to have a photographic memory is kind of like never forgetting your dreams. It's like a burden of knowledge, but at the same time, if we were to wonder about, let's say, an immortal physical being that had an absolute, like, perfect photographic memory, we as people have wondered about the psychology of mortal beings. Now let's try to fathom the psychology of an immortal being that doesn't forget anything. It would be as if the inner realms have access to infinite variations of concepts. It's like the mind doesn't just have access to its memories, but it has access to all the ways it can probabilize how it's going to enter the future. One was to try to study the dimensions of life. There's like initially a dimension of space and matter, and then when matter can move and remember itself, it's like there's a duality there. So it's like your body is a singular existence, your mind is a dualistic experience. Poetically, what is beyond the dualistic experience is the attempt of the mind to attain infinity, but in the search for truth, one wonders about who is doing the searching. And then comes the inseparability of the individual activity with the cosmic activity. This yogi by the name of Swami Krishnananda, he has this quote where he says, once you realize the inseparability of the individual activity and the cosmic activity, the individual activity, the collective activity, then there is no longer a need for meditation. Why? Because there has been an assurance, an energetic presence of your own being was an experiential truth, so simply and instantaneously accessible. We have forgotten that we are being human. We are in an unknown, it's like an unknown being has human form, rather than the human being is an unknown being. You know, it's like there's a separation. Our being, like when we say the word human being, let me actually draw this out. Excuse me. So if the viewers can look at the screen, this would be a further explanation of what I was saying. If we were to look at the word human being, the being part, is pretty much our context, and the human part is the concept. If we wonder about how we're being a human concept, we need to discover a physical self in a physical world. So it's as if our body or here, I'll make it easier. The human concept is a self in a world. The being context is a world excuse me, a world in itself. So that's important to remember, but now I'm going to actually draw it differently. And we say that there is a physical, non-physical, And the context, let's say invisible, visible, these are the same thing. Right, in the way I'm speaking right now, the non-physical and the invisible are the same, and the physical and the visible are the same. Another way I could have even simply said it is that known unknown. Known unknown, and then we have known unknown. The known concept is a biological animal body. The unknown concept to human life is really, let's say, invisible, space-based, mind, right? Dash free will. Sorry, yeah. Slash. So pretty much I'm saying let's say we want to explain to the simplest way to explain what a human being is. We look at what the human word implies, and what does the being imply? The being implies the context, which is in some sense the world, and the human concept is the self. So it's as if wondering about, okay, to be a human is to be a biological animal that has a shape. To be alive as a human being is like a living shape. Okay, to be a living shape, a living structure, a sort of, and a moving structure is a system, pretty much. So the known is based on knowledge, and pretty much we say memory. Because if reality is a sensation, so let's say somebody says I gotta see it, or I need empirical evidence that this table exists, so they touch the table and it exists, right? But what is the act of touch? The act of touch is like a shape interacting with another shape and there being a signal, and the signal being a simulation of a value in accordance to our memory archive. So what I'm trying to say is, if you want to see it to believe it, that's an act of memory, like a past moment and the future moment being the same. But to be an unknown self, where the idea of the advanced communicator comes in, means to not fear what we are, but to understand it. That means whatever being in whatever dimension you are listening to me, don't fear what you are. Try to comprehend the nature of how your intelligence happens, as if the DNA was an instrument that had never existed before, and how a person lives through their life, and in what way you live your life suggests your ability. And it's not that mistakes can't be made, but at times we wonder, ultimately, where does attention go? Really, that's the greater problem for physical bodies. What do 8 billion physical creatures do on a rock in the middle of nowhere? But when it comes to the mind, where does attention go, or to what resolution of a state does it settle into? And the idea is, when you know there is more, the past cannot be truth. So for me, somebody can make any argument of what reality is, and I'll be like, I'm still seeing unknown variables in the moment. And what way you live your life suggests your ability. And it's not that mistakes can't be made, but at times we wonder, ultimately, where does attention go? Really, that's the greater problem for physical bodies. What do physical 8 billion physical creatures do on a rock in the middle of nowhere? But when it comes to the mind, where does attention go, or to what resolution of a state does it settle into? And the idea is, when you know there is more, the past cannot be truth. So for me, somebody can make any argument of what reality is, and I'll be like, I'm still seeing unknown variables in the moment. I'm still noticing that something else is happening, that our species, through an attachment or through a sight only through the lens of the human archetype, has ignored. It's as if by choosing to be a character in the human story, we have actually blindfolded ourselves to all the other ways that the being part of the human being, the context of the world, is happening. So to be a human being, it's like the concept defining the context, but to be a being, to be an intelligence as part of the universe, and then you're trying to wonder, how do you recalibrate your attention as an identity? Like, do you know what I'm saying? It's as if like the guilt of the individual, it's like dissolves into the reality of the collective position. So emotions of an individual dissolve to a collective experience where that emotion is not just comprehended by the limits of the known life. And you know, in this picture, I could have just done this. This is unknown, and this is known. We know the human shape, but we don't know how the human shape or how consciousness is truly leading to the animation of the moment. Like, what is consciousness? A physical mirage, a subjective mirage in an objective desert? Or is it the suggestion that this human being, the creature, how the human species has advanced in contrast to all the other species, is because it realized multiple views on the moment can be considered. In the future generations, they'll write human being with like a plus in the middle. Known human plus unknown being is a human being. You know, if Carl Jung was alive, I think he'd be happy, right? Because the idea of the advanced civilization is just a suggestion of what would the most advanced state be for the human species. And the most advanced state for the human species is to discover the limits of its humanity and wonders about in what other ways does the unknown happen. You see, life is just happening in these two areas. But the unknown is the secret of all worlds in an instant. To trust our unknown being is when reincarnation becomes unnecessary. It's like in the Vedas, they talked about it in a very interesting way, where they were like, okay, there's 7 upper worlds. Earth is the bottom of Mount Meru, the summit is Brahmaloka, and the idea was that those who reach the highest heaven, the 7th heaven, right? The Sufi Attar would say the 7 cities of love, like in a sort of mystical, poetic way. But what it is, it's like, think of it, the 7th heaven. Maybe in Christianity it could be considered the 7th trumpet, I don't know. But what it is the idea that it is the summit of why the world is happening. And Brahma Loka is another way of saying it is God's, where God lives, right? So it's as if those who attain Brahma Loka, they don't need to reincarnate, as if even though their attention finds itself in a worldly simulation, they know they are not here. So it's as if you know you're alive in life, but you realize you're not living it inside an object or a subject. That's the value of the unknown. That's how the unknown is the secret of all worlds in an instant. The opportunity of evolutionary human consciousness is to review the totality there we go. So I'll read what I've written here. The opportunity of an evolutionary human consciousness is to, through the awareness of an unknown reality, to influence the shape of the totality of meanings resolution. So what it means is that people don't realize, I've written here, by the way, to be human is to be the possibility of the most advanced world. Or I could write here, the most advanced view. That's what we all have been searching for. That's why ancient mystics and their stories, still, it's like stories from the past are like whispers from the are whispers in the ears of those who are present. It's like whispers that never end. it's so remarkable how intelligence is happening. And in the future, in my vision of School of Athens 2.0 being the complete resolution of the educational system into really being like, where is the human being and what sort of data set of problems does it want to choose to solve or prioritize? There was an unconscious world. There was a unconscious self. Then there came a conscious self. And then it's going to become a conscious world. So what I've written here is actually 4 phases to evolution I have observed. I am considering. First, the world. Let's say the unconscious world, the world was just happening. The unconscious self was that the world was moving ourself, our sense of self. The conscious self is how Alright guys, sorry about that. To continue. The unconscious self, we still didn't know if we were a creature or not, even though the body was happening. It's just some sort of mechanism without organization, or with a sort of environmentally programmed organization. And then we have come to the conscious self, where the self, the human agency, when it comes to conscious animate movement on the surface of the planet, the self, the human agency, was moving the world. We are living at that time. That's the whole point of speech, where the idea of ourself can move the world And rather than back in the day, just the animal psychology being limited to the ecosystem. So think about a creature in a forest, like the forest is possessing its variations of movement. So the environment defined the self. But now, in the era of conscious humanity, the self is defining the environment. And the question is coming, what is the greatest story of this self that can dictate everything? Now, what the conscious world would be, this is like in the future. And this is in the present. And these are both considered past. So the conscious world is when self and world are simultaneously being witnessed by the unknown. So, in other words, what's waiting the species in the future is, in some sense, there we go. So the future, what awaits it is an unknown collective being witnessing all dimensions of reality. So what is awaiting human intelligence is the future is not just the endless echo of the human archetype, but it is in some sense how we realize the conscious and the unconscious are being simultaneously witnessed. We are the third world to the two worlds that could never find peace. We are the witness of the limitation and the limitless. That is an advanced state of being. So really the purpose of human consciousness is to wonder about the most advanced state, the state of being. So resolution of the lecture. This is the final hill I'm standing on before I end this episode. Humanity is an opportunity. To wonder about the most advanced state of being. This is the final teaching, guys. If somebody was like, Mr.Within, do you have a teaching? I'll be like, this is it. Wonder about the most advanced state of being. And do not wonder with expectation, because that leads to madness. Madness happens when the inner realms has an expectation. It isn't met, and the person's like, it's like the wrath of their inner God wants to, kind of like show off in the outer world. I find every human being has a potential for intensity, and they have a potential for gentleness. And it's really how the attention is being piloted and what signals it picks up on that are present in the moment. It's as if the mystery of our eyes is the mystery of the soul of how the world is even moving. What is the spirit of motion behind all You see, that's when I see at least religion as attempted an answer. To me, religion is like a strategy towards a very advanced state of being. But at the same time, it's an ideological system. So if the language possesses you before the direct experience of the direct divine reality or the unknown nature, because really the awe and the fascination for exploration is the secular metaphysics. It's the secular divinity. You know, somebody fascinated about an unknown world. It doesn't matter what ideological system you're in, you have managed to unlock the moment to its superior held position. That means, imagine, you know, in the future, aliens land down and they tell us what we are. What level of conviction would we have? The power that it's like the greatest subjective energy source of the advanced civilization is how the most advanced state of being is to be your whole moment. To be your whole moment means a witnessing of the self and the world simultaneously. When you are aware that you're witnessing the self and the world simultaneously in an unknown way, what freedom is no longer experientially conditional or ideologically conditional. And it's as if your memory acting as the whole universe. It's like the spotlight goes on the imposter. Then one finds a moment where nothing has to be anything and everything is nothing. That moment is the actual reset, because to reset your life is not to just think of being somebody else, but to wonder about what world is this new self going to walk in, right? Going to enter, because the nature of the mind is that it's opening up. We're literally like a lotus that is unfolding, right? And this lotus that is opening up is suggesting that the future generations have a multidimensional responsibility for how their psychology positions them in a sort of reality. The future generations must be able to, you know what it is, my view is like we in 2022 try to live in the most advanced way, and then the future generations are going to have an opportunity to live way more advanced than that. It's as if, you know, if we care for the advancement of civilization, we are gifting the future generations of the species. It's like an incredible opportunity. Because I often think about, you know, some people think about the day of judgment as if God is like watching, you know. But for me, something inconceivable that is watching this moment of 2022 right now is the unborn future generations staring at what we will do now, as if our audience is not the spirits of our ancestors. It is also in some sense the destiny of our descendants. Right? It's like being a human being is a force. It's a genetical program seeking survival in the void. It is an act of great might, intensity, but also a simple appreciation. Right? It's as if when the mind calms down, it's as if think of the body and mind like bewildered soldiers on a battlefield, and imagine suddenly the war has ended and the soul has come to the body, and it's like, be at ease, drop your weapon, you know, and the body goes into let's say the person sits down to meditate, and then suddenly this command comes from the soul to the mind, which has the sword and the shield still held, right, still in that battle mindset. Suddenly the command comes as if the soul is telling the mind to stop what it's doing, right? When that moment comes, the mind shifts from trying to be an angry god, right, to in some sense becoming a humble servant of the realm. We are all servants of the future, whether we like it or not, and that's the opportunity of our consciousness. We're not just living for ourselves, we're living for all the potential, we're living for all that the potential of the self can be. our eyes are not just visualizers of destiny, they are also that which enters it, because what is destined is what is already here. An advanced civilization is the inevitable realization that if we think as individuals, we may break what are the current civilization, but if we start thinking in collectives with the freedom to not be possessed by an idea, right? Because right now, as I'm giving this talk, what really anybody who doesn't care about philosophy is pretty much possessed by some ideology. Anybody who doesn't care about the unknown or wonder about the unknown, they are ideologically possessed, usually. Even a spiritual person can be ideologically possessed if they think the unknown has to be a known shape. The freedom of greatness is the possibility of its vision. Humanity is an opportunity to not just wonder about the most advanced state, but to be to be conscious of the most advanced state of being. That's what we're trying to find. That means the greatest problem on this planet is not like world hunger or unclean water. It is as if, why is the attention here? What can it do? Does its future potential divine it, or the misery from a past that couldn't see any better? For mankind truly rises when it realizes its heart has been it's like our heart is not beating in our body. It is how the space of the cosmos is conscious. For to be free, it's like the non-existence of the idea of needing to be free ever being there. It's kind of like you were free before the idea of freedom was necessary. That's enlightenment. Thanks for listening, guys. Much blessings and namaste. Rise, mankind, rise.